Exposed. How a lonely rancher transformed a paralyzed woman into the inspiring pride of the PLAI. Jake leaned against the weathered fence post, staring out over the sun-drenched fields of his Texan ranch. The vastness that had once brought him solace now swallowed him whole. The grueling work on the ranch had become his lifeline, a shield against the memories of dropped passes and fallen dreams. But the loneliness clung to him like the dust that swirled in lazy spirals, heavy yet unrelenting. He was just a shadow now, a man whose only company was the echo of his own footsteps on the gravel path. It was easier to bury the pain, to sweat it out with the cattle than to confront the emptiness that gnawed at him. But when he stumbled onto the abandoned remnants of Emily's family farm, a spark flickered in the pit of his gut. A woman, struck down by fate's cruel hand, lay trapped in the shell of her former life, paralyzed, crushed beneath the weight of grief and potential lost. Jake's emotions conflicted violently at the sight. Was it compassion or dread that pushed him toward her? Inside, he battled the pervasive fear that this could quickly become a burden too great to bear, that somehow her suffering would seep into his bones. Yet, the raw sorrow etched on her face tethered him, a reminder of the humanity that still flickered in the recesses of their isolated worlds. The instinct to walk away warred with the urge to reach out. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days turned into weeks as he navigated the complexities of bringing Emily to his ranch. The heat of the Texas sun bore down as they worked side by side, its intensity matching the emotional turmoil boiling within him. Each moment spent with Emily became a contrast against the anguished whispers of the townsfolk. Their friendship stirred unease, drawing disapproving glances and murmurs from familiar faces. Jake's heart pounded with the fear of judgment. Did they see what he saw in her? A spirited artist silenced by trauma, or only the weight of her disability? At night, in the soft glow of their shared struggles, Jake's stomach churned with doubt. Could he challenge the status quo of expectation? He wrestled with thoughts of inadequacy, questioning whether he was strong enough to lift Emily's spirit while still carrying the weight of his own. As she picked up the paintbrush infusing color back into her life, he felt the pressure grow heavier. Watching masterpieces evolve from her hands brought him an unexpected joy, yet he feared for her. What if the townspeople didn't accept her? With the reveal of her artwork looming, a tempest brewed within him, a blend of pride and terror. Would their dreams crumble under the scrutiny of a judgmental community? As the day grew closer, tension coiled tighter around his chest. Jake faced a dark realization. Their intertwined fates could be a fragile strand ready to snap. The canvas might reveal Emily's truth, but it would also unearth his fears. Every second that ticked by pulled him deeper into a whirlpool of unease, leaving him standing at the precipice of anxious uncertainty, consumed by the pressing question, could love and artistry survive the inevitable storm? Under the relentless Texan sun, the day of Emily's first exhibition arrived with an almost oppressive weight. Jake woke before dawn, the dawn chorus of birds doing little to drown out his own spiraling thoughts. He moved mechanically, as if following a script, feeding the cows and checking the fence lines without truly absorbing the surroundings. The pristine quiet was deceptive. His mind screamed louder than any morning animal could. He found himself standing in front of the little barn they had converted into an exhibition space. Emily had poured her heart into every brushstroke, creating vibrant landscapes, intimate portraits, and abstract themes of loss. Each piece was a reflection of her journey, but he feared none of it would be embraced. What if the townsfolk turned away, their faces twisted with disdain rather than admiration? Worse yet, what if they confronted him directly, demanding answers, passing judgment in their whispered congregations? As the hours crawled by and the sun reached its zenith, Jake struggled to silence his inner tempest. He imagined the critical glances they might share, the hushed conversations in the back corners where nostalgia turned to mockery. Each heartbeat felt like a challenge, a reminder that his connection with Emily was entwined with both her courage and his fragility. Finally, the first guests began to arrive. Faces familiar yet now foreign, they stepped cautiously into the warm barn, the air thick with the scent of fresh paint and the remnants of hay. Jake plastered a smile onto his face, even as his heart thudded like a wild drum. He caught Emily from the corner of his eye, her smile illuminating the space and firing the energy around them. It was focused and clear, the expression of someone ready to face the world. But Jake could only focus on his own fears. Sharing her art had been a breakthrough for Emily, yet it also surfaced insecurities he had long buried. He was compelled to guide the crowd, explaining the methods behind her artwork, revealing stories behind each piece. With every word, however, he felt the pull toward self-doubt. It wasn't the strength he offered that mattered in this moment. It was whether he could allow Emily to shine without him overshadowing her. As guests strolled from painting to painting, whispers filtered through the barn, punctuated by the occasional appreciative gasp. Jake's breath quickened. He felt like a ghost hovering in the margins. He overheard fragments of conversations, admiration for Emily, but also the speculations tinged with pity and disdain. His own feelings twisted, suffocating beneath layers of shame and indignation. This evening was supposed to be one of liberation. Instead, he was shackled by anxiety, a self-imposed prisoner of public perception. In an impulsive act of desperation, Jake stepped toward Emily. Their eyes met, his distress reflected in her gentle gaze. He opened his mouth, struggling for words that might offer her comfort, but instead, he found himself asking, "What if they don't see you for who you are?" The atmosphere held its breath, silence stretching between them. Emily's brow furrowed as she considered his words, her lips parting slowly. "Then they don't see what I see," she replied softly, but an unexpected fire sparked in her tone. Jake felt a wave of warmth wash over him. He could see that spark within Emily as she took hold of her truth. Her answer wasn't just about art. It was a declaration of resilience, a call to shift the narrative. In that moment, a flicker of his own repression began to crack. He realized he would need to confront the judgment head-on, not just for Emily, but for himself. It was time to stand firm against the cyclical nature of fear and expectation that had long constrained him. As the first notable piece drew more whispers, he leaned closer to her and asked, "What if we could show them something they couldn't ignore?" Emily's eyes gleamed with the recognition of implied potential, an uncharted territory where his own journey mirrored hers. With a powerful resolve settling over him, Jake knew they were on the brink of something greater than they had imagined. They were not just fighting for acceptance, they were pushing against stifled boundaries, ready to create a legacy beyond the ranch, a revolution born from their struggles. The crowd's murmurs morphed into speculation, their gazes drawn somewhere beyond, as if sensing a storm brewing not from the ominous clouds overhead, but from the palpable energy charging between the two. Jake took a deep breath. The moment had come to shed the darkness of their pasts. But the question lingered deep within. Would they dare step into that light together? Emboldened by a moment of shared resolve, Jake felt a shift within him, a stirring of courage that had long been dormant. The weight of his self-doubt began to lift, replaced by a clarity that struck him like a lightning bolt. He looked around, the once familiar faces now blurred by the new intensity in his vision. No longer was he merely an observer. He stood on the precipice of defending not just Emily's art, but their entire narrative, a narrative that had been marred by years of silence. "I need to do this," he murmured to himself, barely aware of how the words slipped from his lips. The act of claiming this moment, and the reality that followed, sent pulses of adrenaline coursing through his veins. Eyes still flickered around the barn, conveying a mix of interest and skepticism. It was clear that Emily's success hinged not solely on her talent but also on how she was presented, and he was ready to take that leap. Drawing a breath deep into his lungs, Jake stepped forward from the shadows. His natural instinct was to recede, to linger outside of the spotlight where he felt safest, but the urgency to combat his crumbling confidence propelled him forward. People turned to watch him, their attentive gazes no longer filled only with curiosity for Emily's paintings, but now directed at him, an unintentional figure of authority. "Everyone," he began, his voice firm but trembling slightly under the weight of his own vulnerability. "You don't just see art when you walk in here. You see Emily's heart, the very essence of her trials and triumphs. These pieces are not just paintings. They are echoes of a journey filled with pain, power, and the persistence to rise above." His heart raced with each word, his instincts battling against the drive to retreat into familiar shadows. But it felt good to speak out, to claim a narrative rather than allowing it to be dictated by others. He could feel the energy in the room shift, a tangible curiosity surrounding his earnestness. People leaned in and there was a palpable hold on their collective breath. Jake paused, letting those uncertain moments stretch for effect, steadying himself as subtle gasps of understanding drifted through the barn. "I stand here not as Emily's handler or protector, but as a witness to her strength. Art isn't mere canvas and color, but a voice we sometimes fear to express. Today that voice speaks the truth about overcoming odds that seem insurmountable." He found himself scanning the crowd, landing on faces painted with admiration and some that still bore skepticism. A latent challenge bubbled within him to convert those glances into empathy. "We've been taught to view the world through tinted glasses of judgment and hesitation. I myself have lived in those shadows," he continued, drawing them deeper into his vulnerability. "But what if we dare to unpack those biases? What if we let Emily guide us into seeing beyond our preconceptions?" A ripple of realization mingled with awe began to circulate. Jake wasn't just sharing stories about Emily anymore. He was laying bare a part of his own journey, confronting the harsh realities he'd hid behind for too long. Those confessions, raw, unpolished, embodied the profound reflection of a man rising from the ashes of fear and uncertainty. Emily's eyes shone brightly. Were they tears? The lesson wasn't just hers to convey. It became a shared revelation where art took on its true form as a bridge, connecting emotions and breaking barriers of isolation. But just as the atmosphere began to lift, an uneasy murmur broke through the enchantment. A voice from the crowd, someone emboldened by the strength of the moment, but also clinging to the familiar chains of doubt. "What gives you the right to speak for her?" it challenged, a harshness cutting clean through the room's emerging warmth. Jake's heart plummeted, the challenge cutting deeper than expected. It was a pivotal moment, the voice representing an internalized fear he thought he had put to rest. The battle was far from over. It was only just beginning. Yet he could not retreat now. Not after this breakthrough. How could he further prove that they both belonged in this space? He focused intently on Emily, who was watching him intently, a mix of hope and apprehension flickering in her expressive eyes. "What do I have to say or do to break through?" he thought desperately as he prepared to confront the question head-on. Would he stand firm against the challenge, or would he falter under scrutiny? Just as he opened his mouth to reply, the air thickened with tension, the moment suspended in time. The crowd waited breathlessly. The next words could shatter their burgeoning connection or solidify it with unyielding strength. Would he dare take that step into the light, embracing the confrontation? The chill that lingered in the barn felt like an echo of every moment Jake had spent avoiding confrontation, a reminder of the shackles that bound him to a past of uncertainty and fear. As the question hung in the air, he could hear his heartbeat surging against the silence, a pulsing reminder of the stakes. He inhaled sharply, summoning every ounce of courage he had just discovered. "What gives me the right?" he echoed, his voice gradually gaining strength. "What gives me the right is love. Love for Emily, and respect for her journey. My history with her isn't just me being her advocate. We've walked through fire together. I've seen how art is her voice when words fail. Without that voice, her light dims." A wave of emotion surged within him, lifting the tentacles of self-doubt that had often choked his confidence. He could see a shift in the crowd, their skepticism mingling with curiosity, challenging the determination seeping from his words. With each syllable he spoke, the skepticism faded further into the background. He leaned in closer, eyes scanning each face. Art is not defined by the skill of the hand that creates, but by the soul it expresses. Emily's art transcends any barrier you think she faces. It's a testament to resilience born out of darkness. A sliver of understanding ignited among the audience. He could feel their disbelief start to dissolve, but he knew he had to dig deeper. Could he truly redefine himself in this moment, shift from a passive observer into a proud champion? I struggled for years with my own shadows. I used to resent my insecurities, convinced they rendered me invisible. But in my fight to stand beside Emily, I discovered that these fears do not define us. They create the space for an authentic connection with each other. Jake's spirit soared as he revealed the vulnerability that had plagued him for too long. The very act of sharing this struggle transformed him, anchoring his intent in the hearts of those gathered. Instead of cowering in silence, I chose to fight for Emily, because I believe every person, whether they be an artist struggling against the world's judgment or a listener caught in layers of their own fear, deserves to be seen. You are not powerless, neither are we. The murmur shifted to something akin to introspection. Around him the audience began to respond, a tentative ripple of applause building slowly but gaining momentum. For the first time he felt hopeful. It wasn't just about him or Emily anymore. It was a collective revelation coming alive, a moment where they could all step into the light together. Just as he began to feel a sense of triumph, familiar fears clutched at him again. What if this acceptance was only temporary? What if he could not sustain this newfound confidence, leaving Emily to face the world alone again? Yet in that moment, facing external scrutiny had brought him face to face with internal battles he had fought within himself for too long. While he felt the warmth of support, the real challenge still lay ahead. He knew that one moment in the spotlight would not be enough. He needed to become the man capable of sustaining this fight for both him and Emily. Turning back to Emily, he locked eyes with her as if searching for strength in her gaze. "This is just the beginning," he declared. "We will embrace who we are and fight for our narrative." As the applause crescendoed around him, he turned back to the audience, a rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. However, looming at the edges of his newfound clarity lay doubt, like a shadow whispering that real scrutiny waited just beyond this moment. "Is your voice truly strong enough to protect her?" it whispered, dragging him back momentarily into his internal struggle. The battle would continue, and with it, the question that hung in the balance. Was he ready to transform their collective narrative into something they could both truly own? Before he could further commit, an unexpected figure stepped forward from the crowd, a new voice ready to challenge everything he had just built. "But what if you're wrong? What if her art doesn't belong in the spotlight you so desperately want to share?" Jake's heart sank, knowing he couldn't ignore this confrontation that was already taking root, threatening the unity he had just started to forge. The moment of truth was upon him yet again. Would he buckle under a challenge that threatened their connection, or would he rise once more emboldened and unapologetic? Jake felt the weight of the question hanging in the air, a challenge laced with skepticism and doubt. The figure who had stepped forward belonged to a man he recognized, someone embedded in the art community but known for his biting critique. The man's expression bore the air of someone confident in his stance, seasoned by years of debate. Jake could sense the crowd's collective breath held, waiting for him to either falter or thrive. "Emily's art deserves a platform," Jake responded, voice steady despite the tempest swirling within him. "She brings light into places of darkness. You may think otherwise, but that's the essence of what makes her work vital." He fought against the rising tide of uncertainty that threatened to engulf him at the man's challenging glare. It was clear that both of them held ambitions, but they couldn't be more different in their methods. This confrontation wasn't just about Emily. It was about Jake's newfound resolve to carve out a space for himself in the world they occupied. The man scoffed, his nonverbal cues dismissive. "A heartwarming story can't compete with artistic merit. Connecting with the audience is one thing, crafting impactful art is another." A murmur swept through the crowd, and Jake's initial wave of inspiration flickered. Was he being naive? He could feel that familiar wave of doubt crashing over him. Could he defend Emily without exposing himself to the very criticism that had haunted him? Art isn't a competition, Jake pressed, drawing strength from the connection he shared with Emily. It's about expression and the stories that need to be told. Emily's story, our story, is one that resonates deeply. Nothing about her art is diminished because of her circumstances. His voice rang with conviction, bolstered by memories of late nights spent listening to Emily's frustrations, her passionate whispers of dreams unfulfilled. Although he felt vulnerable standing exposed before the crowd, he also felt the twin pillars of love and commitment fortifying him. But as the man stood unwavering, Jake couldn't help but confront another thought that loomed on the fringes. Why am I so afraid? Dissecting his fear demanded clarity. Was it witnessing a reflection of his own self-doubt in the man's disbelief? Could he transcend the limiting beliefs he had clung to for so long? Jake stood resolute, gathering his thoughts. Her art may embody struggle, but it also shines with hope. Saying it doesn't belong is to disregard the journey many of us walk daily. He felt a fire ignite within him, a realization that his journey too was part of a broader narrative, a narrative where vulnerability and resilience intertwined. The air felt electric with anticipation as realization dawned on him. He was not just fighting for Emily, he was fighting for himself, for his own place in a world that often pushed people like them aside. Suddenly, amidst the tension, another voice cut through. But what if everyone still turns away? Jake's eyes widened as he realized the source. A friend from years back, someone who had faced similar challenges. This incredulity, now tinged with apprehension, struck at his own fears. Drawing a deep breath, he steadied himself against the rising tide of uncertainty. I cannot promise everyone will embrace it, he acknowledged, voice mellowed by the weight of vulnerability. But to silence our narrative would be a tragedy far greater than rejection. His heart raced, words cascading like a fervent confession, unearthing buried emotions shaped by grief and exclusion. To dismiss it is to deny the existence of voices that need to be heard. If I am not willing to stand beside Emily, how can I ever expect her to stand for herself? In that moment, an unexpected shift charged through the room, igniting a flicker of recognition even in his critics. Yet, as Jake concluded, he could still feel the specter of doubt lurking nearby. What if this vulnerability opened deeper insecurities he couldn't face? The fear of exposure still grasped at him, threatening to drag him back into silence, an internal battleground not yet resolved. As applause rippled through the audience, the intensity of the moment sank in. It wasn't just applause for Emily's art. It was an acknowledgement of him, of his refusal to retreat into silence. But Jake was acutely aware. The greatest confrontations lay ahead. Would he continue to advocate with strength? Or would he spiral into the very darkness he'd fought so hard to escape? A hush fell over the barn as he scanned the room, realizing he had ignited a conversation but also a conflict that ran far deeper. One question lingered in his mind. How far was he willing to go to defend this narrative, and at what cost? As he stood there, enveloped by the manifestations of shared vulnerability, he prepared for the confrontation that was far from over, knowing a more profound challenge awaited to test his resolve, one that threatened to nudge him towards a defining decision that could alter everything. The room shifted after Jake's speech, the air crackling with a tension he hadn't anticipated. Applause faded quickly, replaced by a low murmur of skepticism. Some faces reflected admiration, while others remained set in disbelief or contempt. He sensed eyes pursuing him, searching for weaknesses, ready to dissect his conviction. With each tick of the clock, the crowd felt transformed into advisors at trial. Judging not just Emily's art, but every word he had said, Jake leaned against a wooden beam, allowing himself a moment to breathe. The adrenaline coursing through his veins felt both empowering and unnerving. He had spoken from the heart, and while it had resonated, the seeds of self-doubt remained ripe for harvest. As he watched the dissenters in the crowd, he felt the weight of past failures press down on him. Had he really made a case for Emily, Or had he simply exposed his inadequacies? Stepping away from the beam, he wandered to a quieter corner, vulnerability clawing at the edges of his resolve. Thoughts spiraled within him. Maybe he was supposed to be strong, a relentless advocate. But what if his strength was surfacing just to mask a myriad of insecurities? Jake had often whispered to himself about being an ally, a protector. Yet here he was, battling critics that reflected his own doubts. He considered his writing, the stories left untold, ideas confined to the pages he kept hidden. The rebirth of his courage to uphold Emily's narrative had awakened part of him that craved broader expression. As Jake wiped a hand across his brow, a light bulb flickered within him. What if he channeled this chaos into a new piece? Could confronting these doubts through his writing help him grow further into the advocate he wanted to be? Convinced that doubt cloaked a hidden strength, he pulled out his notebook. He remembered working late into the night on their shared stories, the way words flowed when they talked about her dreams and inspirations. This endeavor needed to extend beyond Emily. It was time to transform his intuitive experiences, pouring them into narratives exploring both their challenges and triumphs. He began jotting down his thoughts quickly, recognizing that under pressure he could tap into a deeper narrative. Not just Emily's story, but his story woven into hers, both threaded by resilience. Capturing their bond would help not only him, but serve as an empowering manifesto for those who felt unheard. This was how he could expand their narrative, and possibly spark interest from those who once dismissed them. As he immersed himself in writing, a familiar face broke through his concentration. Claire, an old friend he hadn't seen in years, approached him cautiously. "Hey, Jake," she said, concern evident in her tone. "I saw you back there. You really held your ground." "Thanks, Claire," he replied, his pen halting mid-sentence. "But I wonder how much ground I actually gained." She studied him, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. "Your voice matters. Emily's voice matters. You've got to keep pushing through." "Do you think I even have a right to call myself an advocate?" he asked, the words tumbling out before he could filter them. "Jake, you've stepped up for her when so many others wouldn't. But defending Emily doesn't mean ignoring your own struggles. It's okay to feel afraid." Her acknowledgement nudged him, forcing a realization. The insecurities he battled could be a source of connection rather than an anchor dragging him down. Vulnerability didn't erase strength. It cultivated community. Drawing from pain was part of human experience. As they spoke, Jake felt something unprecedented shift within himself, anchoring his resolve. He saw the path stretching before him, intertwining the surge of growth and the fear of it. If he could rewrite the narrative surrounding Emily, why not his own? "I have to keep writing," he declared, determination shaping his words. "I have to bring clarity to our stories, make them visible." Claire beamed, a warmth flooding her expression. "That's the spirit. Embody that passion and let it shine." With renewed purpose, Jake ventured back into the room and faced the lingering murmur of the crowd. He understood now that the path would be fraught with obstacles. But those reflections, the critics, and even the applause would only bolster his movement forward. The next confrontation awaited, ready to challenge both his advocacy for Emily and his own evolving identity. As whispers filled the space around him, one question hung heavy. What would it take to solidify his stance as an advocate for not just Emily, but for himself? Tomorrow he would find the courage to face whatever came next, knowing the answers his journey demanded might just live in the people he inspired along the way. Jake's resolve surged as he gazed at the crowd, their faces entangled in a tapestry of reactions. He felt like a gladiator beneath the roaring sun, every doubtful whisper a sword ready to strike. He took a deep breath and spread his shoulders, welcoming the uncomfortable energy. If he was to be an advocate, he knew he couldn't shy away from scrutiny. Returning to his notebook, he focused on the words flowing from his pen, determined to craft both his and Emily's narrative into something profound and transformative. With each phrase, he delved deeper into their shared experience, capturing the essence of struggle, triumph, and connection. This act of writing felt like ascending a mountain. Each word wrestled free from the precipice of doubt, echoing truths he had long kept buried. The narratives began to interlace, revealing layers of vulnerability he'd scarcely recognized in himself. How often had he shielded his feelings behind a facade of composure? Each stroke of the pen peeled back that armor, exposing not just his roots of fear, but also the burgeoning branches of hope. It became a catharsis as he documented the moments that defined Emily's journey, her paralysis, her passion for art, and the way her spirit illuminated the bleakest corners of existence. Jake felt his own fears unraveling in tandem. Then he turned the lens inward, forced to confront his own misgivings head-on. Writing became a mirror reflecting suppressed thoughts and emotions. What was he truly afraid of? Failure? Judgment? As he explored these themes, he recognized that they were the very fabric of human experience. If he could embrace his flaws, bolster his narrative with authenticity, perhaps he could genuinely advocate for Emily without restraint. This realization shook him. What if he viewed his vulnerability as a point of strength instead of weakness? The crowd shifted around him, and without thinking, Jake raised his voice above the whispers, drawing their attention. Each of us has a story. We navigate our trials, grapple with failures, yet we find strength and resilience in each other. The murmurs quieted, his words hanging in the air like a challenge. People looked at him expectantly. He felt the weight of their gazes, questions brimming just beneath the surface. In that moment, he understood the urgency of sharing their stories authentically, not just for Emily, but for himself. This was how he could forge connections not only as an ally but as a human being navigating similar fears. This approach liberatingly expanded the writing he had begun. It became a web of interconnected narratives. Each entry echoed with the strength to uplift marginalized voices. He felt a new lightness as he delved into these expressions, realizing that articulating their realities could incite change. Clarity started to emerge, between the crosshairs of vulnerability and strength, anchoring him into a clearer vision, a purpose. Yet glancing again at the crowd, Jake noticed a familiar face, a longtime critic who had dismissed Emily's talent even before he opened his mouth. The critic's jaw was set, an insult just waiting to break the surface. Could he defend not only Emily's honor in the face of spite, but also his own narrative? The air shifted. It felt like a gathering storm. The moment pressed down heavy with unspoken tension. Jake's mind raced as he formulated potential responses, strategies to not only defend but elevate their stories. If he faltered, if he allowed that doubt to creep back in, would he lose everything he had fought to reclaim? The next challenge loomed before him like a dark horizon. He could feel the anxiety stirring, teasing the edges of his resolve. But with this pulse of fear came an undeniable thrill, an invitation to confront the deep-seated opposition that had long shadowed his confidence. Tomorrow would bring the opportunity to not just stand up for Emily, but to assert his place as a storyteller, an advocate for those whose truths had been silenced. The stakes were higher than before. Failure could mean falling back into a cycle of doubt. In that defining moment, as the crowd's energy swirled around him, one question crystallized within. Was he ready to face the chorus of opposition to carve out a space for both his and Emily's truth? A palpable tension thrummed through Jake as he faced the crowd, the weight of their anticipation mingling with the critic's sharp gaze. A jolt of realization surged within him. This was not merely about defending Emily. This was a defining moment in his own journey. He could no longer retreat into the shadows of self-doubt. The stakes were personal now. What if he collapsed under the weight of that scrutiny? The thought rattled him, igniting a visceral reaction of fear and determination. The mentor's voice echoed in his mind, reminding him that authentic storytelling could transform both the tale and the teller. He had begun this project bearing Emily's truth. Perhaps it was time to give voice to his own. He took a deep breath, allowing the tension to swirl around him, a tempest begging for release. The critic's judgment loomed like a threat, but Jake chose to see it as a challenge. He needed to confront not only the naysayer in the crowd but also the critic within himself. If he truly wanted to advocate for Emily, he had to shed the layers of fear that had shrouded his identity. Gradually, he allowed himself to recall the long hours spent crafting their shared narrative. The late-night discussions about her dreams, her frustrations, and the relentless drive for artistic expression, despite the confines of her body. Emily's story deserved to rise above the noise of skepticism, but it could only do so if he stood fully and unapologetically beside her. Jake's heart raced, thoughts colliding in a chaotic frenzy as he envisioned facing the critic. He could stand tall and claim their story, her story, and announce to the world the strength weaving through every stroke of her brush, every word he penned. What is art, he thought, if not a conversation between souls? Then let's start the dialogue. Energized by purpose, he opened his notebook, gaze firm and unwavering. He scribbled furiously, the ink bleeding emotions of defiance and hope, his adrenaline flowing into every word. Memories of Emily's laughter and determination ignited a flame within, fueling his resolve. She had taught him that vulnerability could forge connections. Now he needed to exhibit that strength to those who doubted them both. As Jake wrote, he felt the crowd's energy shift. An apprehensive murmur flowed through the crowd as the critic shifted, clearly unsettled by Jake's newfound passion. The room buzzed with anticipation, and he sensed their eyes widening as if they recognized the transformation unfolding before them. The air seemed to crackle. Their attention was a living entity hanging on his next move. Raising his head, Jake felt every heartbeat, every doubt replaced with clarity. He was ready to expose his vulnerabilities, to advocate fiercely, not only for Emily, but also for the parts of himself he had hidden away for too long. He would use their stories as a bridge. The challenge was clear. The moment had come. Yet, as he stood poised to address the crowd, a wave of uncertainty washed over him. What if his voice faltered? What if he failed to captivate them? The whispers of doubt threatened to seep into his resolve, and there he was, standing at the precipice of confrontation. His thoughts spiraled, a cacophony that threatened to drown out the very message he sought to convey. Would he allow the fear of failure to silence him? Could he transcend the judgment, both external and internal, and elevate their narrative beyond the critic's limitations? As the moment beckoned, Jake felt the magnetism of his intentions, his purpose now tied precariously to a leap into the unknown. The question haunted him. Would this be Jake's moment of truth, or would he retreat into silence, letting the chaos overpower his newfound voice? The audible silence enveloped Jake, a cocoon shielding him from the chaos of the world outside. He hadn't noticed it before. The dismissed sounds of laughter, the hushed chatter of anticipation. It all faded as he focused on the flicker of recognition in the crowd's eyes. They were waiting for him to shatter their expectations. He inhaled sharply, grasping the notebook tighter, feeling the slight tremble of the pages against his palm. This was it. He couldn't afford to let the critic's skepticism define them. This was an invitation to collaborate with truth, to weave his voice with Emily's, resonating through the silence. There was power in vulnerability, in revealing the cracks of uncertainty that held the promise of authenticity. "I stand here," Jake began, the weight of his words edged with sincerity, not just as a storyteller but as someone who has walked the path of despair alongside a true artist. The crowd leaned in, anticipation sharpening their focus. The critic's brow furrowed, interest peaked, but Jake could see the tendrils of doubt still wrapped tightly around him. He recalled every fleeting, disheartened glance Emily cast toward her canvas, the moments when she felt less than capable, lesser than others. Each of those moments had shaped their shared narrative. Her story illuminated his own. Emily is not defined by her limitations. She is a force of creativity that refuses to be boxed in. As he spoke, images flooded his mind. Emily tirelessly mixing colors, her passion spilling over canvas, lifting the weight of her world onto vibrant hues. Those memories transformed into fuel, igniting a fire within him. He wasn't just defending her. He was reverberating strength through their collaborative spirit. With every word straining against the fear of judgment, he pressed forward. Art is not merely a display. It is a testament to resilience. It speaks, it fights, and most importantly, it connects us with our humanity. The crowd remained silent, but he could feel them shifting. They were hungry for authenticity, something real to break the monotony of expected narratives. Jake dared to look at the critic. There he saw a flicker of something. Was it interest, skepticism, or acceptance? Jake couldn't decipher it, but he resolved to ignite a response, to provoke a reaction raw and unfiltered. Many of you may see her as incomplete. I see Emily as a reflection of the fierce battle of countless artists stripped of their voices. Each stroke she makes carries a story you could almost taste, a raw testament to the struggle and triumph of creativity battling with grief. She has infused life into that canvas, and in doing so, she has shown me how to allow my own voice to break free. The crowd stirred, a ripple forming as his words settled. For the first time he felt an electric connection with them, their breaths mingling in an unspoken understanding. The critic, arms crossed, seemed less assured in his judgments. Maybe Jake wasn't just defending a story. Maybe he was reshaping his identity, transforming the narrative from helplessness to empowerment. But beneath the surface of clarity surged the chaos of unresolved fears. What if they still didn't understand? What if he failed to convey the depth of Emily's journey, faltering as the whispers of self-doubt rose again? He clenched his fists, grounding himself against the tide. As he prepared to lead them into the heart of Emily's transformative power, something deep within him flickered. Could he risk everything, step farther into the unknown, and fully express the passion that both terrified and exhilarated him? Jake steadied his breath, ready to weave the tapestry of their tale into something transcendent. But even as he opened his mouth to continue, the nagging thought lingered. Would the critic truly see the beauty within the struggle he sought to convey? Would this moment crystallize into clarity or be lost to confusion? The answer hung precariously at the edge of silence. The next step awaited him, but only if he could embrace the chaos surrounding both his and Emily's story. Would he continue to break free from the binds of his own hesitations? Under the relentless Texan sun, Jake stood before the audience, his heart a tempest of emotions and determination. With each word he spoke, he tearfully unveiled not only Emily's art, but also the transformative journey that had reunited them. As he recounted the struggles they faced together, he felt the layers of fear peel away. He realized that advocating for Emily was also about reclaiming his own narrative, a narrative silenced by self-doubt and societal pressures. The more he spoke, the more he awakened the dormant strength within him. Art is not merely a product of talent. It is forged in the fires of our experiences, he declared, his voice crescendoing with clarity. Emily's journey is not defined by her paralysis, but by her resilience in transcending it. Each brushstroke is an echo of the battles she has fought, not just with her body, but within her spirit. As Jake's words flowed like the Texas wind, a hush fell over the crowd. They leaned in closer, ready to embrace the narrative he crafted before them. He observed the subtle shift, a softening of hardened expressions, the emergence of understanding. He understood now that his vulnerability was a beacon that illuminated the humanity shared by everyone present. In a moment of epiphany, he felt the ground beneath him solidify. He no longer trespassed within the shadows of uncertainty, but stood rooted in purpose. I am not just Emily's voice. I am my own, he asserted. Together, we redefine what it means to create, to infuse our pain into every masterpiece. The weight of his past insecurities began to lift like a storm cloud dispersing in the sun's rays. Jake's gaze flickered to Emily, who sat surrounded by her vibrant canvases, a quiet yet powerful energy radiating from her. Their eyes locked, and he found a silent affirmation in the depth of her gaze. With each additional word, he felt an unbreakable bond deepen, forged not only in their individual struggles but in their united triumphs. He was not speaking just for her, but standing boldly with her. Many people see disability as a limitation, he continued, the fervor growing. But those of us walking this path know, disability does not mean incapacity. Each painted piece screams of defiance, a reminder that our struggles and stories belong in the spotlight. The applause erupted like a storm of approval, echoing through the barn, lifting his spirits even higher. But he craved more than applause. He sought true understanding. The critic still loomed, skeptical yet softened by the stirring of compassion in the audience. Jake raised his voice one last time, determined to turn doubt into recognition. Dare to see beyond conventional definitions of art. Emily's work is a testament to the indomitable spirit that dwells within each of us. Let us strive to create spaces where dreams can flourish, not just for the gifted, but for everyone who dares to be seen. Jake's words reverberated like a clarion call, infused with a newfound confidence that was palpable. With each heartbeat, he felt more empowered and recognized, both personally and professionally. No longer confined to the story of the lonely rancher, he liberated himself as a proud advocate for Emily and the integrity of their shared narrative. As the clatter of cleaved inhibitions faded, he stood taller, embracing his growth. The weight of burden transformed into an uplifting force, one that would no longer prevent him from stepping into the light. The recognition he had long sought crystallized in that moment. He felt gratitude swell within him as the crowd's faces reflected awe and admiration, rather than criticism. Jake smiled, genuinely and fully, a smile that stemmed from the depths of his transformation. He had conquered the echoes of solitude. Standing amidst family, friends, and newfound supporters, he had affirmed his place not only as Emily's advocate, but as an advocate of authenticity. His narrative was now a shared anthem, a journey embarked upon together. With an emotional nod toward Emily, he realized it was time to take the next crucial step. The first exhibition had been a resounding success. But beyond applause lay a greater calling, the commitment to keep sharing their story, to reach others who needed to know they were not alone in their battles. "Let us embark on this journey together," he proclaimed to the audience, voice layered with sincerity. "It begins here, with each of you. Your support, your understanding, could create waves of change far beyond this room. We can be the catalysts for a movement, one where the unheard can rise, where art is synonymous with resilience." As the applause swallowed him whole, he felt the thrill of liberation bloom deep within. Not only had he accomplished the incredible, he had unlocked the door to brighter tomorrows, for Emily and for himself. Recognizing the moment of vast possibility unfolding before them, he beckoned with an urgent conviction. Join us. Subscribe now to lend your voice. Like this message to support the narratives that matter. Comment with your thoughts and insights, and share this inspiration with friends who need this fire to ignite their own. This is the moment to engage. Don't wait another second to elevate the stories that deserve to be told.